I have been observing the rhythm of the technology industry for over 30 years, and I can tell you that the window between early adoption and structural displacement is closing faster than anyone anticipated. We are moving into 2026, a year that I believe will be remembered as the great tipping point, the moment when the theoretical promise of artificial intelligence becomes the baseline for physical and economic reality. If you are waiting for a return to the normal of 2020 or even 2023, you are effectively betting against the most powerful industrial force in human history. I have seen the way computing cycles move, and 2026 is where the inertia of the old world finally gives way to the acceleration of the new one. Most people are unprepared because they are still viewing AI as a tool they use rather than an environment they inhabit. You must understand that the global economy is not just being updated, it is being re-platformed. The rules that governed your career, your business, and your financial security for the last 3 decades are being replaced by 4 brutal industry realities. These are not trends to watch, they are laws of the new physics of work and wealth. If you do not accept them now, you will find yourself operating a manual system in a world that has moved to autonomous orchestration. The danger is not that you will be replaced by a robot. The danger is that you will remain a biological worker in an economy that has moved to digital labor. I want to walk you through these 4 realities, not to cause alarm, but to provide the clarity you need to navigate the next 5 years. Those who understand these shifts before they are common knowledge will be the architects of the coming decade. Those who ignore them will be its casualties. Please stay with me until the final insight, because the difference between participating in this wealth transfer and being excluded by it comes down to how you respond to what I am about to tell you. If you value this kind of deep, long cycle perspective, consider subscribing so we can navigate these shifts together as they unfold. In the context of 2026, we are witnessing the collision of 2 massive industrial cycles. For decades, the global economy was built on the foundation of general-purpose computing. This was the era where we wrote software to help humans do work. But we have reached the theoretical limits of that model. The big picture today is a transition into accelerated computing and generative AI at an industrial scale. This is not just about a faster computer, it is about a different kind of factory. In the Industrial Revolution, we built factories that took in raw materials and energy to produce physical goods. In the 2026 era, we are building intelligence factories that take in raw data and electricity to produce tokens of reasoning. This matters now because the infrastructure for this shift is already being laid into the ground. Trillions of dollars of data center capacity are being converted from traditional CPUs to GPUs. This is the largest capital expenditure in the history of our species, and it is happening because the economics are undeniable. When I look at the landscape of 2026, I see a world where the cost of human equivalent reasoning has plummeted. This creates a reality gap between those who still believe in the old world of manual intellectual labor and those who have moved into the world of automated intelligence. Most people are operating on the old reality, the belief that if they work hard and follow the established rules, the system will continue to reward them. But the system is changing its fundamental architecture. In the old reality, the unit of value was the hour of human work. In the 2026 reality, the unit of value is the outcome per compute cycle. If you are an individual or a company trying to sell hours, you are selling a commodity that is in infinite supply. The world is moving toward a state of hyper-productivity. We are seeing the emergence of the one-person unicorn, a concept that was impossible just 5 years ago. This is happening because the tools of production have been democratized to the point where a single visionary can orchestrate a global operation. But this opportunity comes with a dark side. As the ceiling of what one person can do rises, the floor of what is required to remain competitive also rises. By 2026, knowing how to use AI will no longer be a competitive advantage, it will be the bare minimum for entry. It is like being able to read and write in the 20th century. If you couldn't do it, you weren't part of the economy. We are also seeing a shift in the global power structure. We used to talk about developed and developing nations based on their physical infrastructure. In the 2026 context, the only thing that matters is sovereign AI. Every country, every company, and every individual must own their own intelligence. If you rely on someone else's model to think for you, you are a digital tenant, not an owner. This matters now because the 2026 cycle is when the first mover advantage becomes permanent. Once these intelligence models are integrated into the fabric of a business or a career, they create a flywheel effect that is impossible to catch. The urgency isn't about the technology itself, it's about the positioning before the window of 2026 slams shut. In previous technological shifts, like the transition to mobile or the cloud, there was a grace period of several years. You had time to watch, learn, and then adapt. The 2026 shift is different because it is recursive. The AI is helping us build better AI, which is helping us build even better AI. The speed of innovation is no longer limited by human clicking speed. It is limited only by the laws of physics and the supply of energy. This is why the big picture feels so overwhelming to most. The old path was a ladder. The new path is a rocket ship, but it is one that you have to build while it is already in flight. I want you to understand that the environment of 2026 is one of infinite leverage. For the first time in history, the relationship between input and output is no longer linear. You can put in 1 unit of effort and through the orchestration of intelligence, generate 1,000 units of value. But the inverse is also true. If you are not using that leverage, you are competing against those who are. This creates a massive urgency for everyone to rethink their role in the economy. Are you a source of energy for the machine, or are you the one directing its path? By 2026, the middle ground, the place where most people feel safe, will be the most dangerous place to be. It is the big picture of a world being divided into those who command the new tools and those who are rendered invisible by them. This is the context of the realities we are about to discuss. The first reality you must accept before 2026 is the death of the knowledge monopoly. For the last century, we built a society where knowing things was the ultimate currency. If you knew how to calculate structural loads, how to write a specific legal contract, or how to diagnose a software bug, you were protected. You held a monopoly over that specific piece of the world. But as we move toward 2026, the cost of specialized knowledge is approaching zero. We are entering a world where the answer is a commodity. If your value is based on what you know, you are competing with a model that has read every book, every line of code, and every research paper ever written. The core framework for survival shifts from knowledge acquisition to architectural judgment. In this new reality, the winner is not the person with the most facts in their head, but the person who can look at a complex problem and design the system to solve it. Think of it as the difference between a master bricklayer and an architect. The bricklayer is skilled, but the architect understands how the entire building stands up. By 2026, the AI will be the world's greatest bricklayer. If you aren't the architect, you will find yourself in a race to the bottom, competing on price with a machine that doesn't sleep. The second reality is the rise of the sovereign agent. We are moving away from the era of general labor and into the era of agentic value. In the old framework, you were an employee, a cog in a larger machine. You performed a function within a hierarchy. In the 2026 framework, you must operate as a sovereign agent, regardless of whether you work for yourself or a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Being a sovereign agent means you don't wait for a task, you identify a bottleneck, and you orchestrate a solution using every tool at your disposal. This requires a shift in identity. Most people are task-oriented. They ask, what should I do today? The sovereign agent asks, what outcome can I own today? This is a 20-year horizon shift. If you spend the next 5 years waiting for instructions, you will be trained out of the workforce. If you spend the next 5 years learning how to command fleets of digital agents to produce results, you become irreplaceable. The math of opportunity cost here is staggering. A traditional worker produces linear value. A sovereign agent produces exponential value because their labor is no longer tied to their time. The third reality is the rule of the infinite leverage loop. We are seeing a fundamental change in the physics of production. In the past, scaling a business or a career required more stuff, more people, more offices, more equipment. This created friction. In the 2026 reality, we use the digital twin philosophy for everything. We simulate, we iterate, and we optimize in a virtual environment before we ever touch the physical world. This creates a loop of infinite leverage. If you can build a digital system that solves a problem, you can scale that solution 1 billion times for almost zero marginal cost. This is the software-defined everything reality. If you are still operating in a world where you have to physically show up and perform a manual action to create value, you are working in a friction-heavy environment. The core principle here is to move as much of your value creation process as possible into the digital, automated loop. This allows you to fail 10,000 times in simulation so you can succeed perfectly in reality. Those who ignore this loop will find themselves moving at human speed in a world that is moving at the speed of light. The fourth reality is the primacy of the human interface. As the how becomes automated, the why becomes the only thing that matters. This is the core framework of human-centric orchestration. We must focus on the traits that machines cannot simulate: deep empathy, cultural context, high-stakes judgment, and vision. But you must not mistake this for a retreat into soft skills alone. It is the integration of deep technical intuition with human judgment. I call this the Centaur model. By 2026, the most successful individuals will not be the pure techies or the pure creatives. They will be the people who can speak both languages fluently. They will be the ones who can look at a machine-generated output and say, this is technically correct, but it is humanly wrong. This level of judgment cannot be automated because it requires a soul and a sense of purpose. Consider the long-term math. If you invest 10,000 hours into becoming a human interface for technology, your value compounds every time the technology improves. You are the multiplier. If the technology becomes 10x better, you become 10x more valuable. However, if you spend those same 10,000 hours competing with the technology, every time it gets 10x better, you become 10x less relevant. This is the ultimate contrast in the 2026 framework. You are either the multiplier or the competitor. One path leads to generational wealth and influence. The other leads to a quiet, steady decline into obsolescence. You have to treat your career as a system to be optimized, not a job to be held. The items in this framework: architectural judgment, sovereign agency, the leverage loop, and the human interface are the pillars of the new economy. If you ignore them, you are choosing to stay in a reality that is being deleted. If you embrace them, you are positioning yourself at the very top of the most significant wealth creation event in history. I have to be very direct with you. The most dangerous thing you can do right now is believe that 2026 is just another year on the calendar. Most people are comforting themselves with the idea that they have time to adjust, but the reality is that the structural displacement has already begun. There is a brutal honesty we must face. The market does not care about your past sacrifices, your tenure, or the effort you put into learning a skill that is now being automated for pennies. We are entering an era of radical transparency and value. In the old world, you could hide in the middle management of a large corporation or behind a complex sounding job title. You could be productive enough to stay under the radar. But as we approach 2026, the intelligence factory is shining a very bright light on every role, every task, and every cost center. If the value you provide can be distilled into a prompt or a predictable workflow, your position is no longer a career, It is a temporary line item on a budget that is waiting to be optimized. You must realize that the middle class of skills is being hollowed out. We are seeing a massive divergence where the rewards are flowing to the extremes. On one end, you have the high-level orchestrators, the people I call the sovereign agents, who use AI to amplify their vision. On the other end, you have the physical, localized labor that machines cannot yet reach. Everything in between, the data entry, the mid-level analysis, the standard legal work, the repetitive coding is in a state of terminal decline. This is an uncomfortable truth because it means the safe path we were all taught to follow is now the most exposed. The specialized degree that was supposed to be your insurance policy is becoming a record of a world that no longer exists. If you are clinging to your credentials as a shield, you are making a fatal mistake. Your credentials are a reflection of what you knew, not what you can do in a world of infinite leverage. There is also a popular myth that creativity will be the safe haven for everyone. This is a shallow way of thinking that will lead many people into poverty. Generative models are already proving that they can be more creative. In terms of volume, iteration, and synthesis, then 99% of humans. If your version of creativity is just rearranging existing ideas into a slightly different format, you are not safe. The only creativity that survives 2026 is high agency creativity, the kind that identifies a brand new problem and assembles the digital and human resources to solve it in a way that has never been done before. This requires a level of courage and risk, taking that most people have been trained to avoid. The trade-off is simple but painful. You must give up the illusion of a guaranteed path to have a chance at a leveraged future. We must also talk about the cost of inaction. In a linear world, if you wait a year to learn a new skill, you are just 1 year behind. In the exponential world of 2026, if you wait a year, the gap between you and the frontier of the economy grows by a factor of 10. You are not just falling behind, you are being disconnected from the system entirely. I see people debating the ethics of AI or waiting for government regulations to slow things down. This is a form of cognitive dissonance. The physics of the global economy do not wait for permission. Companies that do not adopt these realities will be liquidated by those that do. This means the pressure on you will not come from the technology itself, but from the brutal competition of a marketplace that has discovered a way to be 1,000 times more efficient. The reality check is that the safety net is being replaced by a performance floor. In the past, the floor was low enough that almost anyone with a basic education could stand on it. By 2026, the floor will be so high that only those who have mastered the four realities will be able to stay on their feet. This feels uncomfortable because it places the entire burden of adaptation on the individual. You can no longer rely on your employer to upskill you or the government to protect your niche. This is a period of extreme personal responsibility. If you don't take ownership of your digital leverage today, you are essentially choosing to become a ward of whatever remains of the old system. The path forward is not about working harder within the old cage. It's about having the honesty to admit the cage is gone and you are now in a wild, open, and highly competitive landscape. It is brutal, it is truthful, and it is the only way to ensure you are not left behind in the great 2026 reckoning. As we look toward the horizon of 2026, it becomes clear that we are not just witnessing a change in technology, but a change in the human condition. We are moving away from an era where we were defined by our labor and into an era where we are defined by our intent. This is the ultimate ending insight. The systems we have built, the silicon, the software, the global networks of intelligence, are ultimately a mirror. They reflect back to us our own level of agency, our own vision, and our own willingness to lead. For decades, the structure of the economy allowed us to hide our true potential behind the safety of routines. We could be productive without being purposeful. But as the routines are automated, the only thing left is the purpose. You are standing at a threshold where the cost of being a follower has become infinite. In the old world, following the crowd was a survival strategy. In the 2026 reality, following the crowd is a path to economic invisibility. The separation that is coming is not just about wealth, but about the fundamental way we experience our lives. One path leads to a life where you are constantly reacting to a world you don't understand, struggling to keep up with a machine you cannot control. The other path leads to a life of sovereign command, where you use the most powerful tools ever created to amplify your own unique perspective and values. This is an identity-level choice. You can choose to be a person who is protected by the past or a person who is propelled by the future. I have spent my life at the center of these cycles, and I can tell you that the most successful people are not the ones who were the smartest or the most skilled in the traditional sense. They were the ones who had the quiet confidence to let go of a world that was dying to make room for the one that was being born. They understood that the greatest risk is not the change itself, but the refusal to acknowledge it until it is too late. As 2026 approaches, do not look for a map, look for a compass. The map of the old industry is useless because the terrain is being rewritten every single day. But the compass, the four realities of architectural judgment, sovereign agency, infinite leverage, and the human interface, will always point you toward the center of value. The world of 2026 will be a world of incredible abundance for those who know how to orchestrate it, and a world of incredible pressure for those who try to resist it. I leave you with this reflection: if the version of you that exists today were to meet the version of you that must exist in 2026, would they recognize each other? The gap between those two versions is the work you must do now. The intelligence revolution is not something that is happening to us. It is something that is happening for us, provided we have the courage to step into the role of the architect. The future belongs to the agentic, the adaptable, and the bold. It is time to stop being a passenger in your own career and start being the one who directs the flow of intelligence. The door is open, the tools are ready, and the reality of 2026 is waiting for you to define it. If this perspective has helped you see the patterns behind the noise, then you are already ahead of the curve. The transition to 2026 will be the most significant shift of our lifetimes, and clarity is the only real protection. If you are ready to stop reacting to the present and start building for the inevitable, subscribe and join this conversation. We are decoding the long cycles of the future, one reality at a time. The world is changing. Make sure you're the one directing it.